My name is Samuel Parker, and my wife's name is Grace. We get along just fine, and I really enjoy what I do. I work as a lawyer for a company that specializes in management consulting and accounting, with a focus on corporate law. The hours are long, but I have the flexibility to adjust my schedule when needed, as long as I meet my deadlines. That keeps the boss happy. Grace works for a publishing company, mainly editing other people's writing, and she does most of it from home. She has the freedom to set her own hours, which allows her to juggle taking care of our 3 kids. We've got 2 daughters, 8 and 6, and a 5-year-old son. We're just your typical busy family, always running around with the kids' activities and trying to squeeze in some fun when we can. As a couple, we aim to go out together at least twice a month. We don't always pull it off, but we try. Until recently, I thought Grace was satisfied with her life, with our life. Despite me putting in around 60 hours a week at work, I believed she was content. I thought we had a solid relationship. Our intimate life was active, and I made it a point to do little things to show her I loved her and appreciated her as both a wife and a mother. But about a year ago, during one of our date nights, everything in our relationship and marriage took a turn. Grace brought up a conversation that would change the course of our lives. "Honey, do you ever feel like we're missing out on things?" I replied. "Gosh, I'm not sure. What things are you thinking about, Grace?" She continued. "Lately, it feels like we're stuck in a routine. I'm not sure if you notice it too." "What does that routine look like to you?" I asked, trying to understand her better. "It seems like all we do is work and take care of the kids," she explained. "We hardly have any time for ourselves." I considered what she was saying and had a feeling I knew where this was headed. "Would you like to go on a vacation? Just the 2 of us? We could ask your parents to watch the kids for a week, go to the Caribbean for some sun and beach. We could both use some relaxation." Grace's response caught me off guard. "That sounds nice, honey, but I had something else in mind to shake things up a bit." Now I was curious. "What exactly are you thinking, dear?" Grace hesitated, then started. "You know how we've talked about pretending to pick up others and getting close to them? What if we actually tried it?" My heart skipped a beat. "What are you suggesting?" she urged. "Just hear me out for a minute." "What if we tried something different, like having an open marriage?" Grace suggested, catching me completely off guard. "We could ease into it and see if it suits us before making any big commitments." Stunned, I could barely find the words. I don't even know how to respond to that." She leaned in, her voice more insistent. "Think about it. What if we found other people we were drawn to, just for some occasional no-strings-attached intimacy? It could reignite the spark in our marriage, bring back some of that excitement we've lost." I was practically holding my breath, trying to process what she was saying. "Are you seriously suggesting that you want to sleep with another man?" She gave me a reassuring smile, as if this was no big deal. "It wouldn't be cheating, honey. Just casual encounters. Nothing emotional, nothing that would threaten what we have. Maybe a few times a month, maybe less, depending on what feels right. What do you think?" I was floored. "So let me get this straight. You're proposing that we both sleep with other people a couple of times a month?" "Not necessarily twice a month," she said, shrugging it off as if it were a minor detail. "Could be more, could be less, depending on what works for us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like she had just hit me with a ton of bricks. After a moment, I managed to ask, "And this is something we'd both be involved in?" "Absolutely," she replied, almost too eagerly. "We'd both get to explore this together. Think about the new things we could learn about each other, the ways we could bring that passion back into our relationship." I let out a slow breath, my mind racing. "But how would we even start something like this? Do you already have someone in mind? Because right now, I'm far from convinced." Grace stayed composed, like she'd already thought it all through. "Just consider it for a moment. We could have this extra intimacy without any of the strings attached, at times that wouldn't interfere with our family life or our schedules. We'd still be the same for each other, the same for our kids. If anything, it could even make us closer, bring back that passion we've been missing." Deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Grace is always so methodical, and this idea seemed too well thought out. It made me wonder if she already had someone in mind. So I asked again, needing to be sure. "You're really saying we should both look for other partners outside our marriage? You really think you wouldn't feel jealous, upset, or hurt if I was with another woman? And you expect me to just be fine with you being with another man?" Is that what you're suggesting? I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. Well, yeah, that's pretty much it. What do you think? Should we give it a try? She asked eagerly, clearly hoping I'd go along with her wild idea. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this, to figure out who she had in mind for this so-called open marriage. If I agree to this crazy plan, when do you want to start? And who's the guy you're thinking about? I asked directly. Her enthusiasm gave away more than she probably intended. Well, there's this guy, Ethan, at the publishing company. He's been asking me to lunch whenever I'm at the office. He's younger than us, and from what I've heard, he's already in a relationship. So there it was. Some young guy named Ethan had caught her eye. Ethan, huh? And you think me agreeing to this will somehow spice up our marriage? I asked, struggling to hide my frustration. I still don't see how you being with another man is supposed to improve our marriage, I continued, trying to make sense of her twisted logic. If you want better intimacy, why don't we focus on enhancing it together, with each other, not by adding someone else into the mix? How does bringing another man into our lives improve our connection? I just want to understand. She looked at me as if trying to sell me on this absurd idea. Imagine the fresh perspectives we could gain from each other, like hiring a consultant for new ideas, she said, clearly trying to convince me. Why not consider seeing a therapist together? You having an affair with some guy doesn't seem like it would benefit our relationship at all, I countered. Grace struggled to let go of her fantasy. Honey, trust me, my suggestion is for our benefit. I'd never do anything to harm our marriage, she insisted, but her persistence was starting to wear me down. Grace, I'm not trying to control you. I'm just telling you how I think this could affect us and our family, I said, trying to stay calm. But think of it as an adventure for both of us. Imagine how much we could learn and grow together, she urged, as if this was some kind of self-improvement course. Grace, this isn't like signing up for a class. You're talking about being intimate with another man. Good grief, I muttered, finally reaching my breaking point. I stood up and headed to the men's room to splash some cold water on my face, hoping to clear my head. As I looked at myself in the mirror, a sinking feeling hit me. I couldn't shake the suspicion that she had ulterior motives, that she was determined to go through with this plan no matter what I said. I dried off and returned to the table, still unconvinced that Grace's plan would do anything to strengthen our marriage. In fact, I was certain it would only complicate things further. We already had enough on our plate without adding the mess of bringing other people into our sex life, even if we both agreed to it. What really troubled me was that I married Grace with the understanding that we were committing to be exclusive. That's what marriage meant to me. Loyalty and monogamy. At least, that's what I thought we both believed. We even vowed to be faithful to each other on our wedding day. But now, it was painfully clear that she wasn't finding the sexual fulfillment she needed with me, and that realization hit me hard. The next 2 weeks were tense. Grace kept flashing me those hopeful smiles, clearly expecting me to get on board with her plan. She even stepped up our usual routine of twice-a-week sex to every single night for a whole week. After putting the kids to bed, she'd take my hand and lead me to the bedroom. We'd shower together, exploring each other with soapy hands. Grace looked great, fit, attractive, and obviously craving more intimacy than we'd been having. It made me wonder if I'd been neglecting her needs in bed. She was more enthusiastic than I'd seen her in years, wanting to try positions we hadn't used since before the kids came along. Sure, maybe we had fallen into a bit of a rut, but was sleeping with other people really the answer? A week went by, and she didn't mention the open marriage idea again. I started to think she'd forgotten about it, maybe realizing that more frequent sex with me was what she truly wanted. But I was wrong. Grace continued initiating intimacy every night, and after one particularly intense session, where she'd engaged me twice, she brought it up again. Honey, have you given any more thought to trying that open marriage idea I suggested? She asked, as if this was just another casual conversation. Dang, Grace, I said, feeling a mix of frustration and disappointment. Honestly, I was kind of hoping all this extra sex meant you'd changed your mind about the whole thing. She sighed. Well, the closeness with you lately has been awesome, but it's been pretty much the same every time we need to switch things up, make it more exciting. That's what I'm hoping we can learn from others, Grace explained, still holding on to the idea of an open marriage. Her insistence disappointed me deeply. So you still want us to be open just so you can be with other men? I asked, my tone betraying how unhappy I was with the whole thing. Don't be so down, Samuel. This is a chance for us to grow individually and bring new experiences to our marriage. The passion and excitement you want, you're not getting it with me right now, are you? This is an opportunity for both of us to explore new things and bring that spark back into our relationship. I really believe it'll make us stronger as a couple, she replied, almost trying to convince herself as much as me. Grace, like I've said before, I don't control you. You make your own choices. If this is truly what you want, then I guess you'll go ahead with it, even if I'm against it. Just be careful about what you're getting into, because every decision has consequences, I warned her, knowing deep down that this path was only leading us toward disaster. Thank you, Samuel. You'll see. This will benefit both of us, she said, as if that settled everything. With that conversation, it felt like the matter was closed. I left the room to pour myself a stiff drink, realizing that our marriage, as I knew it, was over. Grace had gotten what she wanted, free rein to be with other men. There wasn't much I could do to stop her now. Everything about this situation was a mess, but I knew it was time for her to face the consequences of her choices. A month later, Grace wasted no time in meeting up with Ethan from her workplace. They were seeing each other twice a week, despite our agreement that there wouldn't be any overnight stays. But after their fourth meeting, she started texting me late at night, claiming she'd had too much wine and couldn't drive home. How convenient. I advised her to take a cab, but I could see where this was heading. One Saturday, after putting the kids to bed, I decided we needed to have a serious talk about what had been going on over the past month. Grace, we need to clarify some things about this open marriage arrangement. We shouldn't be doing anything the other person isn't comfortable with or hasn't agreed to. She looked at me, feigning confusion. Well, what specific things are you referring to? Well, for starters, we agreed on no overnight stays, but you've spent the night with Ethan 4 times in the past 2 weeks. That's not what we discussed. I want you home at night, Grace. Honestly, I worry when you're not here, and you don't even tell me where you're going. That needs to change. Are you just upset about having to handle the kids' morning routine alone? She asked, trying to downplay the situation. No, this isn't about the kids. It's about your actions and our agreement, I clarified, not letting her off the hook that easily. All right, no more overnight stays. What's next? She responded, almost as if she was checking off a list. Perhaps we should create a written agreement, something that acknowledges our responsibilities to each other, the kids, and as a family, I suggested, hoping to bring some structure to this mess. Samuel, that seems unnecessary. We're adults. We can handle this, she said, dismissing my idea. Maybe so, but I believe communication is crucial for making this work. When you turn off your phone while you're with another man, it worries me. Your safety is important to me, I pressed on, not willing to let her brush my concerns aside. Another thing that concerns me is protection. Is your partner using protection? I asked, cutting straight to the point. I'm on birth control, Samuel, if that's what you're worried about, she replied, missing the real concern. Grace, I'm worried about sexually transmitted diseases. Did he provide proof from a doctor that he's STD-free? I asked, my patience wearing thin. I didn't ask, but I'm sure he's fine, she said, a bit too casually for my liking. So he's not using protection then? Does he finish inside you? I asked, the bluntness of my question making her blush. Yes, he does, she admitted. If he had an STD and didn't tell you, and then passed it to you, you could pass it to me. If we ever have sex again, I said, making it clear where I stood. In my mind, I'd already decided I wasn't going to be intimate with her again, at least not for now. Grace, when you decided against a monogamous marriage, it came with responsibilities. Do you plan to stop having sex with me altogether? I asked, the reality of our situation hitting hard. I loved her dearly. We had children together, and I once believed we'd grow old together, taking care of each other. But now, I was growing increasingly upset by her disregard for our well-being. I don't know what else to say, I added, feeling the weight of our crumbling marriage. I want to have a conversation with Ethan, I stated, surprising her with my request. What? Why do you want to talk to him? She asked, clearly caught off guard. I want to meet him and have a chat. I need to ensure that he's prioritizing your safety and interest, I said, though my real intentions were deeper. I wanted to confirm whether Grace had been truthful with him about our so-called agreement. I wasn't sure if she had made it clear to Ethan that their relationship was purely physical, with no room for romantic feelings. Grace had been too secretive about her activities, and I suspected Ethan might be offering her something she wasn't getting from me, something like love. Was she in love with him? It's rare for someone to love two people equally. As feelings develop for one person, affection for another typically diminishes. That's just human nature. I felt like I'd already lost my wife the day she started considering an open marriage. I hadn't been looking for a partner myself, to be honest. I wasn't really interested until now. But seeing this new side of Grace made me think, if she's allowed to pursue her own happiness, shouldn't I have the same opportunity? 6 months later? It's been several months since we agreed to an open marriage, and Grace is now involved with a steady boyfriend. First it was Ethan, but now it's a guy named Lucas. A few months ago, I made it clear that I wanted to meet him. Grace was against the idea, which only made me more determined to have a talk with the man who is now part of my wife's life. One day, I decided to visit the publishing company where Ethan worked. I picked a day when I knew Grace would be working from home, hoping it would give me a better chance of finding Ethan. When I arrived, the receptionist directed me to Ethan's cubicle. I was taken aback when I saw him. He looked to be in his mid-20s, about my height, with brown hair and a lean build. I introduced myself, and as soon as he stood up to shake my hand, he realized who I was. His face went pale, and he quickly pulled back his hand. I wondered why he reacted that way. "Hi, Ethan. I'm Samuel Parker, Grace's husband. We need to have a talk. Let's find a quiet place to discuss some important issues," I said, motioning for him to follow me. I wasn't entirely sure he would agree, but he did, though he looked nervous. Maybe he thought I was there to confront him. It was obvious that his view of his relationship with Grace was very different from mine. We ended up at a nearby coffee shop, where we ordered coffee and a croissant. I wanted to make him comfortable so he would open up to me. "So Ethan, tell me a bit about yourself," I started, trying to keep the conversation light. Ethan seemed jittery, but after a few more questions, I started to piece together his understanding of his relationship with Grace and what he expected from her. Through persistent questioning, I began to uncover some telling details about their relationship. It became clear that Grace had started her sexual relationship with Ethan a full month before we ever agreed to an open marriage. Ethan consistently avoided using protection, claiming he was disease-free and willing to get tested if needed. During our conversation, he mentioned that Grace had expressed concerns about our marriage, suggesting I wasn't providing enough emotional support and that she had considered separation or divorce. He also relayed that Grace had portrayed me as accepting her relationships with other men. Ethan asked if I resented him and whether I planned any retaliation. I reassured him that I didn't, which seemed to calm him down. However, I made it clear that from now on, he was to use protection with Grace, with no exceptions. I warned him of the potential consequences if he ignored this directive. "Does your girlfriend know you're seeing Grace?" I asked. "What girlfriend?" he replied, looking puzzled. "Grace told me you had a girlfriend and that being intimate with her was in addition to your other relationship," I clarified. "My last girlfriend and I broke up months ago. Grace is my only girlfriend now," Ethan explained. This revelation underscored Grace's dishonesty. She had misled me about her relationship with Ethan and her expectations for their future together. It was clear her vision for our future was very different from mine. A few nights later, Grace was enraged when I told her I had met with Ethan. "Why did you go see Ethan? He said you were angry and threatened him," she snapped. I smirked internally at her reaction. "Did he tell you I insisted he use protection if he wanted to be with you?" "Yes," she replied, "but using protection ruins the fun. Why are you so fixated on this? We're both STD-free, for God's sake." I took a calm approach. "Honey, I'm just worried about your safety. We agreed on protection, and you consented to it." Grace muttered something under her breath and stormed off. We didn't speak for 2 days. When we finally did talk, she was furious again. "Are you satisfied now? Ethan broke up with me. I won't see him again. Is that what you wanted when you went to see him?" "What I wanted, my dear wife," I said, "was to ensure your safety. I didn't want you to risk getting a disease that could harm you or even be fatal. That's what matters to me. I also wanted to prevent any diseases from spreading to me, though it seems unnecessary since we haven't been intimate in so long that I can't even remember the last time. What happened to the idea that this open marriage would benefit us and strengthen our relationship. When was that supposed to happen, Grace? I was furious, and she could tell. Well, I hope you're satisfied now, she snapped before storming off. A chilling silence settled over our marriage. For an entire month, we barely spoke. Then, out of nowhere, Grace announced she was meeting a new man. She dressed in a revealing blouse and skirt, topped off with 4-inch high heels. Her hair and makeup were impeccable, and she wore a new perfume that I hadn't seen before. Suddenly, she was unnaturally sweet, calling me dear for the first time in a while, as she mentioned going out to meet someone she'd met online. Alarm bells went off in my head. Where are you going and who are you meeting? I demanded, reminding her that she was expected home tonight, not at 4 a.m. Things quickly spiraled out of control, but I did manage to find out his name, his job, and that he was divorced. Grace started seeing Lucas once a week, but it didn't take long for her to almost move in with him. She now spends only a few nights a week at home, sometimes just one, typically when her lover is away for work. I believe he works as a sales representative for a pharmaceutical company, though Grace keeps details about him vague. Frustrated with her behavior, I moved her belongings to the spare bedroom. She was shocked, but I explained that it would be easier for me to have overnight guests, especially since I'm the one managing the kids all the time. Her belief that having a relationship with another man would reignite passion in our marriage didn't pan out as she hoped. Instead, it brought a lot of unnecessary drama. I found myself growing increasingly frustrated with Grace. I probably should have divorced her long ago, but I didn't want our kids to grow up in a broken home. Even if I did leave, the children would be left with a mother who wasn't present for them at night. It was a trying period for me. I struggled to understand why she was pursuing such behavior and why I was putting up with it. Her hope that a relationship with another man would reignite passion in our marriage had failed. Instead, it introduced a lot of drama into our lives. I found myself increasingly frustrated with Grace. Perhaps I should have ended our marriage long ago, but the thought of our kids growing up in a broken home was unbearable. Even if I did leave, they'd still be with a mother who wasn't there for them at night. It was tough trying to reconcile why she was behaving this way and why I tolerated it. Yes, you're suggesting that I'm not exempt from blame, and you're probably right. I was too lenient with her actions. I ended up taking on most of the parenting responsibilities while she was hardly ever home. The kids noticed her absence and missed having their mother around. They asked about her almost every day, wondering why she was away so much. At first, I told them she was spending time with a friend and would be back soon. However, seeing her only 1 or 2 nights a week made it hard for them to believe her assurances of love. My oldest, who was 9, even asked, "Dad, why does Mom spend so much time with her friend? Who is her friend?" It was difficult to explain. Grace began neglecting important responsibilities she used to handle for the kids. One afternoon, I received a call from the school informing me that the parent-teacher interviews, which Grace typically attended, had taken place the day before without her. The vice principal, concerned because Grace was usually reliable, offered to reschedule if there were any issues. Attempts to reach Grace by phone were unsuccessful. Her phone was off, leading only to voicemail. I apologized to the school and promised to reschedule the missed parent-teacher meeting. When I tried reaching Grace, her phone went straight to voicemail. I left a worried message about her absence and asked her to get back to me as soon as possible. She didn't return my call for 3 days, dismissing it as unimportant. I wanted to confront her directly, but when she finally agreed to meet on Friday, she canceled last minute, citing a vague work commitment. It felt like she was avoiding the conversation, possibly due to pressure from her boyfriend. The situation reached a new low with our daughter's birthday. Birthdays are a big deal for kids. Presents, cake, ice cream, and friends. My daughter's 10th birthday was no exception. I had asked Grace weeks in advance to plan the party, and she promised she would. But as the date approached, it became clear she wasn't going to follow through. I had to step in. I sent out invitations, bought a gift, booked a venue, and arranged the food. I kept hoping Grace would remember and show up, but she didn't. When the day came, my daughter was heartbroken. I had to make excuses to other parents about Grace's absence. My daughter felt deeply let down, and when I called Grace, I handed the phone to her. "Mom, it's me. Where are you?" my daughter asked. Grace hesitated. "What's up, sweetie?" "Mom, it's my birthday. Why aren't you here? We had a party, but you didn't come." There was a long pause before the call abruptly ended. I was left with the sound of my daughter's sobs and a growing sense of despair. A neighbor approached me, noticing Grace's absence and sensing the strain in our relationship. That evening, I reached a breaking point. Grace's detachment from our family and her consistent neglect of our children's needs made it clear that our marriage was no longer viable. We were essentially living separate lives, and it was time to face the reality that divorce was the only option left. It was time to bring the situation to a close. The next day, I dialed Grace's number, anticipating her voicemail. I left a brief but urgent message, asking her to return my call or come over to the house for an important discussion. Surprisingly, the urgency seemed to grab her attention. She showed up at our home after dinner that night. "Samuel, what's going on? Why the urgent message? Are the kids okay?" she asked, looking worried. "Grace, thanks for coming. I really needed to speak with you. Please, have a seat," I said, gesturing to the couch. She glanced at her watch, clearly impatient. "This won't take long. What's this about?" she asked. "Since you've been gone, the kids keep asking when you'll be home. Are you planning to return soon?" "It feels like you've already left us," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I will come back, Samuel. I just need this time to find the passion and closeness we've lost. Once I've figured things out, I'll come home a better wife, and we'll be a family again," she replied. "That's not the whole picture. Sophie was devastated when you missed her birthday party the other night, and the other kids are also wondering if you'll be there for their birthdays." "How could you forget your own children's milestones?" I asked, my frustration evident. Grace's eyes widened in shock. "I didn't mean to forget. I just needed this time." "Here's the hard truth," I continued. "I've made up my mind. I want a divorce." "What? Why now?" "I'll be back soon, Samuel," she protested. "There's no marriage left here, Grace. You're not fulfilling your role as a wife, and since you've already moved out, I can't fulfill mine either. You shouldn't have left in the first place. I've kept quiet for the sake of our kids, but this has gone too far. You moved out months ago and barely acknowledged the responsibilities you have towards them, let alone to me. My lawyer says the court will view this as abandonment, both of our marriage and our children. But Samuel, I love you and the kids. Can't you see that?" Grace pleaded. "No, Grace, I don't see any love," I said firmly. "If you truly loved your husband, you wouldn't be having an affair. If you cared about us, you wouldn't have left or moved in with your boyfriend. Talking about bringing passion and intensity back to our marriage is just a joke. I won't even bring the kids into this conversation because your actions already show how little you care for them. The joke's on me, but I'm done laughing. We're getting a divorce as soon as possible. Pack your things and go back to him. You're not my wife anymore, and I'm not your husband. I'll start looking for someone new, a new wife and mother for our children." "But Samuel, we're married. I'm your wife. I love you. I don't want a divorce," she argued, her voice breaking. "I do want a divorce," I replied. "I've looked into it, and the courts recognize when someone has abandoned their marriage. You left our marriage and our kids. So leave the house and go back to Lucas, where you want to be. I don't want you here anymore." Grace seemed taken aback. She gathered her purse and quietly left. What I hadn't shared with Grace was that, while she was with her new boyfriend, I had started seeing someone too. Her name was Emily. She had 2 kids, and her husband had left her for a younger woman. After a date with her, I came home to find my children eagerly waiting to hear about it. "Honey, how was your date?" my daughter asked. "It went really well," I said with a smile. "Emily is a very nice person. I like her a lot." "Is she going to be our new mother?" she asked with surprising directness. "Wow, where did that come from?" I chuckled. "That's not something you need to worry about right now. Besides, this was only our first date. I'm not sure when there will be a second one." "Dad, is Mom ever coming back?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. I spoke softly. "I don't know, but I know one thing for sure. I'm not going anywhere. I'll always be here for you, your sister, and your brother. You can count on that." "Thanks, Dad," she said, hugging me tightly. We then headed back to her room, and I tucked her into bed. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the counter, reflecting on the situation. My wife had essentially abandoned her family for her lover, while I had enjoyed a pleasant evening with a woman who could potentially become my new partner. It had been the most enjoyable night I'd had in over a year. The intimacy had been incredible, and I was eager for it to continue. I longed for a companion to share my life with again, but I reminded myself to proceed with caution. On Monday, I contacted my divorce lawyer to discuss the next steps. With the financial figures we had, I knew that divorcing Grace would mean dipping into my retirement savings to cover her share of the house and possibly providing a modest amount of alimony for a few years. It seemed like a necessary expense now that Grace had shown no interest in returning and clearly no longer prioritized our children or me. I instructed my lawyer to move forward and deliver the divorce papers. I had her address, and since she mostly worked from home, finding her shouldn't be too difficult. Proceed with it and let's finalize this marriage, I said. 3 days later, a process server knocked on the door of the apartment where Grace and Lucas lived. The server was skilled at navigating apartment buildings, so when Grace answered, he handed her an envelope. "Grace Parker, this is for you," he said, handing her the envelope. Grace was stunned by the words. She knew what the envelope contained. She slowly shut the door and took the envelope into the kitchen, placing it on the counter. She stared at it for over an hour, reflecting on the past year and her choices. Were they wise decisions? Did she fully consider the consequences when she chose to pursue an affair? Grace pondered whether Lucas was worth the sacrifice of her life and children. The intimacy she experienced with him was unparalleled, but was it enough to justify the upheaval? Had her husband Samuel truly been so dull that she felt compelled to leave him and her children behind? Did she despise her former life so much that she was willing to trade it for Lucas? These questions weighed heavily on her. With trepidation, Grace slid open the envelope and withdrew the divorce papers. She handled them delicately, almost as if they might explode. As she read through them, she saw that the divorce cited abandonment and infidelity, with a division of marital assets and Samuel's full custody of the children, including visitation rights for her. Alimony was set at $1,000 monthly for 2 years. The weight of it all hit her. "Oh my God, what have I done?" she thought. The lies and deceit she had woven over the past 2 years now seemed to haunt her. She could no longer convince herself that she had won, that she could act without consequences, or that she could have relationships with other men without Samuel's input. Desperate, Grace called Samuel's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She left a brief message asking him to call her regarding some important paperwork. She then tried calling her former home but got no answer. Realizing she needed to act quickly to salvage her marriage, she grabbed her car keys and purse and drove to Samuel's office. His assistant, who was aware of Grace's affair, informed her that he was out for the day. Frustrated, Grace returned to her old house, hoping to wait for Samuel and the kids to return from school. When the children arrived around 4 p.m. with their after-school sitter, they greeted Grace with coldness. Her eldest, in particular, refused to acknowledge her presence beyond a curt, "What are you doing here?" Grace took a seat in the dining room while the kids had a snack and started their homework. She noticed the changes in the decor since her last visit: new items on the walls, different curtains, and a few pieces of new furniture. At around 5:15 p.m., Samuel came home. Grace quickly approached him as he entered through the back door. "Samuel, honey, I'm home. I'm glad you're here. We need to discuss some papers that were delivered to me today." "Great," Samuel replied, his tone non-committal. "Did you sign the papers and bring them with you?" Samuel asked, his tone steady. "I signed them before my lawyer sent them to you," Grace replied, her voice faltering. "I believe what I'm proposing is fair and aligns with family and divorce laws in the state. The kids will remain with me. That's not up for negotiation. However, you can have visitation rights if you'd like, and if they're willing to see you." "Sweetheart, I'm planning to return home tonight," Grace continued, her eyes filled with hope. "I've realized that I need you and the kids back in my life. I made a mistake thinking I needed someone else. You and the kids are all I need. I understand that now, and I'll strive to be a good wife and mother." "Not so fast, Grace," Samuel said firmly. "When you chose to leave us for Lucas, that was your decision. I tried to convince you otherwise, but you were adamant about your choice. Now you have to face the consequences. You're not welcome back. Your home is with Lucas now. You don't belong here anymore. It's been a year since you left." Grace's eyes welled with tears as she began to cry softly. Samuel handed her some tissues and waited a few minutes for her to regain her composure. "I think it's time for you to leave," he said gently. "Can I spend some time with the kids, please?" Grace asked, her voice trembling. "Sure," Samuel said. "I'll go get them." Samuel went upstairs to fetch the kids, and explained that their mother was downstairs and wanted to see them. Initially hesitant, the children slowly followed him down to the kitchen after some reassurance that they didn't have to talk to her if they didn't want to. Grace greeted them with a forced smile. "Hi, kids. I need a hug from you." They stood still, not moving towards her. Sophie, the oldest, spoke up. "Why did you leave us, Mom?" Grace's tears flowed freely again. "I'm coming home, kids. I've missed you all so much. I love you all so much." Sophie's question cut through the moment. "If you love us so much, why did you leave us and stay away so long?" Grace was taken aback by the question. The answer she had wasn't one she wanted to admit, that she had sought consequence-free relationships with other men and had ignored the impact on her family. Grace's presence was a stark reminder of her self-centered decisions. She was only now confronting the reality of what she'd lost. I intervened firmly. "Kids, why don't you head upstairs for a bit? Your mom and I need to have a private chat." The children, visibly uncomfortable, made their way out of the kitchen, led by Sophie. Once they were gone, I faced Grace squarely. "So, do you still think running off with Lucas was the right choice? Did you honestly believe you could just waltz back in here as if nothing happened?" Grace's only response was a series of shaky breaths and sniffles. "I've moved on, if that wasn't clear. It seems like you only figured that out when you got the divorce papers today. The minute you saw that your family had had enough, you came rushing back." Her silence and continued crying did little to sway me. "Gather up whatever you haven't already taken. I've packed everything I could find into boxes in the garage. It should be straightforward for you. If you need help, Lucas can give you a hand. You can take whatever you want, but the kids and I are staying put." After another moment of silence, I added, "It's time for you to go. There's nothing left to discuss. I'm not interested in rekindling anything with you. The kids aren't thrilled about the idea either. It's best for you to go back to Lucas. Have your lawyer go over the divorce papers and handle the final details." I stood up and opened the front door, signaling for her to leave. "Goodbye, Grace." Grace looked lost, as if grappling with the enormity of her choices. She gathered her things and slowly walked out the front door. I closed the door behind her with a sense of finality. 3 months later, my lawyer arranged for us to finalize the divorce. We discussed visitation rights for the kids, agreeing that they should not be forced to see their mother if they didn't want to. Initially, visits would be supervised by their grandparents, with a possibility for unsupervised visits if things improved over time. Ultimately, it was up to the kids whether they wanted to see their mother. Surprisingly, they did agree to a few visits at first. However, after meeting Lucas, they felt uncomfortable and chose to cut off contact. It seemed their instincts about character were right on the mark. Meanwhile, my relationship with Emily grew stronger. We met 2 or 3 times a week, and I suggested we engage in more activities beyond just physical intimacy. We started taking our kids on outings, and her daughters, who were close in age to my younger children, quickly bonded with them. Our first trip to the zoo, followed by pizza, was a hit, and it marked a shift from casual dating to something more serious. A year has passed since then, and my life has transformed significantly. I'm older and wiser, and now I share my home with Emily and our combined brood of 5 kids. Managing a household of 7 is undeniably challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding. By having 2 of the girls share a room, we make it work comfortably. We've become a close-knit family unit. Emily and I got married shortly after blending our families. Our wedding was an intimate ceremony with close family and friends, officiated by a judge who is a dear friend, on a beautiful beach in the Dominican Republic. It was a memorable and joyful occasion. We prioritize our relationship by having a date night every week to focus on each other. Our intimate life is fulfilling, and we emphasize the importance of communication. We've both agreed that open and honest communication is vital. One evening at dinner, the kids expressed their desire to try camping. We bought some camping gear and decided to give it a go at a state park. It turned out to be a fantastic experience. The campfire and roasting marshmallows were huge hits. More than once, as the marshmallows caught fire, I found myself dodging gooey, flaming blobs that seemed to come straight at my head. 4 girls and 1 boy can make a lot of noise when they're having fun with flaming marshmallows. I decided to formally adopt Emily's 2 daughters so that everyone in our household would share the same last name. It made things simpler for us. About a month ago, during our usual date night, Emily surprised me once again. She's an incredible woman who brings me immense happiness every day. That evening, I noticed she chose water instead of her usual glass of wine. While that alone wasn't unusual, when she pulled out a small white plastic stick from her purse, I immediately realized what was happening. With a smile, she handed it to me. "You might want to take a look at this, dear." I was thrilled to discover that Emily, my wife of less than a year, and I, who already shared 5 children, were expecting another baby. The excitement grew when we learned that Emily was actually pregnant with twins. That means we'll soon have 7 children in total. Fortunately, I had recently been promoted at work and now oversee the legal division of the company. With the increased salary and bonuses, we'll be able to handle the financial responsibilities of a larger family and even save for their education. To prepare for our expanding family, we bought a cottage by a lake, about a 2-hour drive from our home. We're in the midst of renovating and expanding it to accommodate our active and growing brood. Looking back, I realize how fortunate I am. Despite the challenges of a failed marriage, I found a new beginning within just 2 years. What initially seemed like a tough period for me and my children, when Grace left us for someone else, turned out for the best. Meeting Emily, who loved me and my kids, was a blessing. Amid the organized chaos of our large family, I am deeply grateful for the luck I had in finding Emily and her daughters. With 2 more children on the way, our family feels complete. Our kids get along well, and we are truly a happy family. Plus, Emily was breathtakingly beautiful. As for Grace, her life took a different turn. Her relationship with Lucas didn't stand the test of time. It became apparent that Lucas had a tendency to pursue married women, and it wasn't long before he abandoned Grace for yet another woman he had seduced away from her own marriage. Grace settled into a 1-bedroom apartment and continued working as a book editor, trying to rebuild her life. I heard she was dating again, but I didn't follow her closely. One day, while Emily and I were out with the kids, I thought I caught a glimpse of Grace downtown. We were strolling along with the older kids guiding the younger ones. We didn't pause to speak with her, but I had a feeling she watched us as we passed by. I wondered if she was reflecting on what might have been, or if she felt a sense of liberation from the responsibilities she left behind. It's hard to say what was going through her mind,